My guest today is Professor Esther Duflo, who's a professor of economics at MIT and the co-founder of the Poverty Action Lab, one of the bright young voices in economics who has a new book out. The book is Poor Economics, which he wrote with another professor at MIT, Professor Banjari. The book is about how to help the poor.
Exactly.
And you have sort of talked about two different approaches that people have used, sort of the Jeffrey Sachs approach, which is sort of hand over a lot of money, and money will help, and that nations are poor largely because they're landlocked and they're malaria-ridden, etc. And Bill Easterly at NYU vehemently disagrees with that. You want to talk a little bit about Easterly's view and then what your view sort of is?
Right, so the debate on development quickly becomes a debate about aid, and in particular if aid can help in fighting poverty or not. On the one hand, there is a Sachs view that you outline, and the Easterly view is that aid is more likely to be part of the problem rather than part of the solution. It creates rents that people can start fighting over, and it prevents people and countries from discovering their own geniuses.
And you basically say that neither of them are right, that the thing to do is to go out there and empirically test solutions, essentially using controlled trials.
Well, neither of them is fully right, and neither of them is fully wrong.
Right.
In that they both have important element of truth, and at the same time, they're not the whole truth. And in some sense, the question is not so much whether aid works, but what works.
Right.
Irrespective of who funds it. In some sense, the aid question is not the most important, because that's not a very important part of the budget that goes towards helping the poor worldwide. So what is important is how do we make sure that whatever monies are spent, whoever spends the money, is being well spent on the right policy. So we are trying to shift the debate towards those questions.
And there's some odd things that happen. So a lot of children, you know the statistics, die of diarrhea, and there are very cheap, effective, and you talk about this in the book, solutions to this. Kids with diarrhea can be given a salt-sugar mix, essentially, that will rehydrate them, and I'm sure the cost is in the pennies, right? And but they don't take it because they don't think it's the right solution often, right? They want a drip.
Right, that's a combination of factors that explain why all these like low-hanging fruits, these technologies that could at very low cost save lives, from fighting diarrhea to immunization or bed nets for malaria, have a limited take-up. One is information, what you're saying. The other is, in a lot of cases, these are things you need to do in advance, and the benefits will be in the future, and there is the natural human tendency to procrastinate. So a very interesting set of questions is, how do you structure your offering of these products in a way that people will start taking them up? Part of our argument is we tend to forget, because our own lives are so sheltered and so organized, that the lives of the poor is completely exposed. They're like hedge fund managers.
You call them barefoot hedge fund managers in the book. And
for their own lives.
Right. And they're exposed to risks that we just don't even think about.
Exactly. Coming from the fact that the water that they get could give cholera to their children, and going all the way through the fact that a bad harvest or a bad rainfall could wipe out their livelihood for a year.
There's certainly a view among certain people that essentially the poor can entrepreneur their way out of poverty if they're given the some basic tools, some basic infrastructure because you see them doing some amazingly entrepreneurial things, but it's not. You suggest that it's not really a silver bullet.
I mean, in some sense, that has this view that the poor are natural entrepreneur, I think, has done a lot of good in giving us a richer view of the poor. Stop thinking of the poor as helpless.
Right. The sort of old Victorian view that they almost deserve it.
Exactly. So in that view, it's been very positive. But it may have gone a little too far, in that it has slightly confused the fact that people run their own business with the fact that they're entrepreneurs. Because in our country, usually if you run your own business, it's really a choice, because you want to take the risks, you like it. But in poor countries, 50% of the very poor run their own business in urban areas, and much more than that in rural areas, because they have a farm. But not all of these people are true entrepreneurs in the sense of liking it. For a lot of people, it's not a choice. It's something that they are doing because they don't have another job.
And they don't often have any employees, right? These are really very small-scale concerns.
The vast majority of these businesses have 0 employee and 0 assets. The median business has a table. Right, that's the assets of a business. So we really have to think more of as like buying themselves a job.
We just have a minute left here, and I just want to talk very briefly about microlending and microcredit, which is, of course, gone, again, one is silver bullet-ish at one point and now sort of demonized in some quarters. Can you just briefly give your view of microlending and microfinance and sort of its role in this sort of mosaic of solutions?
Well, it segues very naturally in this view of the poor entrepreneur, because a lot of the poor run a very small business. The great value of microcredit is that it allows them to run this business a little bit better.
Right.
And so it allows people who have a small business anywhere to have a slightly less small business. And therefore they live a little bit better. So this is positive. And the positive impact is small, because that has not allowed them to really go from a tiny business to a somewhat bigger business to an even bigger businesses, because those barriers are just too big. So in that sense, microfinance didn't deliver what it set out to deliver. But on the other hand, if you multiply these small businesses by 200 million clients, even if the benefit is fairly small per person, it's an enormous amount of good. So I think this is a tremendous waste that we moved from one fad, which is microcredit was going to save the whole world, to the other fad that we have today, that it's a disaster and it keeps people in debt trap. Because I think the truth is that it's a remarkable innovation which had allowed people who were completely shut down from the financial system, both credit and savings, access to a financial system with a certain level of benefits, and it would be a real shame to lose it.
Well, thank you very much for being here. The book, again, is Poor Economics, and this is Professor Esther Duflo.
Thank you very much.